Right, let's get another 15 lessons from a genocide.
16. Military checkpoints are bad news. At the beginning of Bosnia, I'm a Bosnian genocide survivor, and this is 15 Lessons of Bosnian Genocide, Part 2. Lesson number 16. Military checkpoints are bad news. At the beginning of Bosnian genocide, suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, military checkpoints started to pop up everywhere. These were usually done by Serb paramilitaries or Serbian army or sometimes the Yugoslav National Army as means of restricting freedom of movement for Bosniaks and Croats in Bosnia, creating in some areas of the country kill zones in which people were trapped and then they had to await their fate as Serbian extremists went village to village, killing, murdering, raping, and displacing everybody. Lesson 17. If the military ever shows up unannounced and starts setting up camp, or some kind of a mysterious military installation, or some other kind of fuckery, expect something terrible is coming. For example, in the little village of Žulja, near Nevesinje, in 1991, a full year before Bosnian genocide started, Yugoslav National Army and other kinds of creepy figures rolled in and set up camps all over the area. Turns out this was a strategic location from which they were going to attempt to genocide the Mostar region of Bosnia. The local villagers knew something was wrong and they felt nervous, but they didn't panic nearly as much as they should have. When something like that shows up and nobody's answering any questions and they appear threatening, at times violent, you need to take that seriously and get the hell out of there. Lesson number 18. If any kind of an apartheid system starts setting up by one group over another, one ethnicity over another, expect much worse things are coming. In many regions of Bosnia where Serbs took control as early as 1991, they quickly started to marginalize non-Serbs. So Bosniaks and Croats were fired from their jobs, they were demoted, they were put under house arrest, and so on. This is a very clear signal that things will escalate. Things never just stop at the apartheid. Things will go from there. Once one marginalized group is put under apartheid, others will be, and eventually that apartheid will escalate into genocide. Number 19, if you're ever told to report for quote-unquote questioning, don't go. In Bosnia in 1992, Serb extremists had full
Fuck no, never go, man. Just send a lawyer.
list of all Bosniak and all Croatian civilians in different villages and towns around the country. And when they would roll in, they would ask all men usually to come and report for questioning. And in most cases, those men were then imprisoned, murdered, tortured, displaced. So in other words, if anybody rolls into town or village asking for you to report for questioning, run. Sometimes fight, but usually run. Lesson number 20. If extremists roll into your town and they start separating men from women, that usually means that men will be taken and murdered or they'll be taken and imprisoned, so then women will be attacked and would be usually without defense. So as soon as you hear men are being separated from women, assume that either the men or the women or both will be dead, and therefore fight or run immediately. Lesson number 21. If you actually are able to escape to safety, do not be lured back by extremists to your house under the pretenses that everything's going to be fine, that you're not going to be harmed. Usually what this meant in Bosnia is they wanted people back so they can rob them of their valuables. And then they can rape, murder, torture, and displace them, meaning they wanted to enact their sick fantasies on people. Unfortunately, a particularly egregious example of this was when a lot of the civilians of the town of Visegrad went to safety to the town of Gorazde, and then they were lured back under the pretenses that unless they come back, they're going to lose their jobs. Of course, they were never going to get their jobs, but people actually believed that they had to go back and then things are going to be normal. Well, when they went back, women were put into rape camps, men were murdered, people were taken on bridges with their throats cut and thrown into the river. So in other words, when you're somewhere safe, do not go back where you came from. Number 22, if dehumanizing propaganda is being run against a group, that group should assume that it'll escalate to genocide. So, for example, Serb propaganda in Prijedor was spreading rumors that Bosnian doctors were forcibly aborting Serb women's babies. There was no proof of that, but that was one of the propaganda points they were pushing. They also said the Muslim Mujahideen Green Berets were getting ready to attack everybody, to rape all the women, to torture all the men. Turns out that's exactly what Serbs wanted to do. So in other words, Serb extremist propaganda was always every accusation is a confession. Everything that Serb extremists were planning to do, they accused of the other side of planning to do. Number 23, if you are being threatened publicly for something like annihilation. Like, for example, when Karadzic, who was the political leader of the Bosnian Serb extremists, came on television and actually said, if the country votes to secede from Yugoslavia, this will lead to death of all Muslims. Well, at that time, a lot of people didn't believe him. They should have believed him, because if they believed him and knew this was coming, then measures would have been taken to make this a lot harder to pull off for Serb extremists. They would not have allowed him to park tanks and other weaponry around town at ease. They would not have allowed them to set up barricades in order to block everybody into town. So if somebody's threatening you, either take measures to evacuate or be ready for them. So when they come, they pay a heavy price for trying to pull off a genocide. Lesson number 24. Bluffing a threat is better than not being threatening at all. So, for example, in the town of Visegrad, there was a guy called Murat Šabanović, and he took over with a group of men the local dam on the river Drina, and he proceeded to threaten to blow it up. He actually didn't have any explosive. He had no means of blowing it up. But the fact that he threatened caused panic. So that bluff may have actually bought some time for some civilians to be able to run up into the forests and the mountains and avoid genocide. So therefore, bluffing is better than non-bluffing. If you can do anything to disrupt a genocide, do it, because it may buy you or somebody else some time to be able to run away. Lesson number 25. If extremists have the means to come and kill you, but they're calling you for negotiations, immediately assume you're still going to be killed. The reason why people call for negotiations is to appear less threatening in order for you to let your guard down, and then suddenly things unfold. Mladic called for negotiations with people in Srebrenica before the fall of Srebrenica, and we know how that turned out. In the case of Žepa, however, when they called for negotiations, the head of defense for Žepa, a guy called Avdo Palic, did something very smart. He used that opportunity to tell the people in the village, as soon as I step out to go negotiate, you run. But this was because he knew he was sacrificing himself, and he was maybe buying the time to the village to run. So lesson number 26 is a very important one. Don't assume that your enemy is not afraid of you, even if the odds are long. So, for example, in Ključ area, there were 125 territorial defense Bosniak soldiers who were pinned against the Sana River by around 3,000 Serbian forces. And then their leader, Amir Abdic, did a very key thing, which is he said, you know what, we're pinned down here, let's just attack them. Let's go up the hill and smash right into them, despite being way outnumbered. Well, this was a fantastic idea, because when they went up there, Serbs were shocked that they were coming up. They expected these guys would surrender, so when they came up that hill and hit them, they in fact not only beat the Serb unit that they hit, they took them hostage and then used them as negotiation to get themselves out of that area to safety in Bihać. Serb extremists were only tough guys when they were up against children and women and they were raping and murdering defenseless civilians, but when they were up against somebody who had a gun and that somebody punched them in the mouth, they folded. Number 27, don't assume that women are not capable of some of the worst evils just like men are. In the case of Brčko in a Luka concentration camp, Monika Karan-Ilic, who was the girlfriend of the camp commander, she did things like stab men with broken bottles and rip their stomachs apart. She sexually assaulted and castrated men. She poured acid on men. And in the case of Jadranka Ždralo, she actually sexually assaulted and abused women that were being raped by other men, and then she was organizing the rape and then hitting women and holding them down while they were being raped. So in other words, women are absolutely capable of evil. Seeing one in an extremist unit and thinking she's going to be nicer to me or maybe she'll help me is probably not going to happen. In fact, a lot of them ended up things worse than some of the men. Lesson number 28, sometimes defying the orders to stop a military operation is better than actually following through on those orders. Like in the case of Sana 95 attack by the 5th Corps of the Bosnian Army, they had an opportunity to liberate the towns of Prijedor and Banja Luka, but they stopped because they were under threat. They should not have stopped. I mean, most of them now agree, 30 years later, they should have just kept going and suffered any kind of consequences that would have come of that. Number 29, sometimes swimming into another country is better than trying to reach safe areas of your own. In the cases of Srebrenica and Žepa, some people that decided to swim across River Drina into Serbia actually were saved by doing so, whereas the others, which ran the other way and tried to make their way through the mountains, were killed. Lesson number 30. If camouflage masked men enter your bus or enter your train and say, we're taking these people off. Assume that those people are being taken for torture, rape, and murder. In the case of Stripci and Severin massacres, where masked men appeared on a train and a masked man appeared on a bus, everybody was very compliant. But if they had tried to overpower those people that came to pick them up, they may have had a chance. Because they complied, they went straight to their deaths. So there you go. That was 15 lessons of Bosnian genocide part 2. So try to remember these things. And if God forbid time comes for you to use the knowledge, be brave.
15 lessons. They're good lessons. I like it so fast. It's like rapid. Pop, 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 pop. So yeah, man. Trust nobody. Be prepared. Be prepared. Let's see. Let's make number 3. Part 3 coming up.